The Pediatric Lounge, a podcast taking you behind the door of the physician's lounge to get a deeper insight into just what docs are talking about today. From the clinically profound to the wonderfully routine and everything in between.
Hi, and welcome to the Pediatric Lounge. Please help us to welcome Dr. Jason Halegoua. He's the founder of Peds First Pediatric Office here on Suffolk, Long Island. He's a physician, he's a PhD, he's an MBA, he's a computer geek, a guitar enthusiast, and a personal friend. Dr. Herb Bravo, our host, and I are honored to chat with him in the lounge. He will speak to us today about the topic, does a physician really need to obtain an MBA in order to stay in business? Welcome, Jason.
Hi, George. How are you today?
How you doing, Herb? It's Tuesday, another podcast, also from Fort Lauderdale, but I just moved my spot. Today, we're going to have a very good friend of mine and fellow guitarist, Dr. Jason Halegoua. He's going to talk to us today a little bit about something that I know a little bit about, and it's, does a doctor really need to have an MBA to have a private practice? So take it away, guys.
Good morning, everybody.
Morning. Glad to have you here. So you have a fascinating journey through life. And you're quite a little bit intimidating. What on God the earth is a PhD in molecular pathology?
First off, if you met me, I wouldn't be as intimidating because I'm not even quite 5'6", but
He's a nice guy. He's
not what you'd call an intimidating specimen. But
Jason is an MD, an MBA, a PhD, and something in the future. And he told me once that I get a degree every 10 years. I get bored. So now I'm waiting for the next one.
So what's a PhD in molecular pathology?
It was primarily infectious disease based, some genetics, some immunology, but I studied a murine retrovirus that was capable of mutating in a way that caused cancer, and certain, types of mice were capable of getting that cancer. Certain ones managed to evade it. So we teased out which part of the immune response was responsible and some of the genetics that underlie that immune response.
Is that being used clinically today in any cancer? Or
not that I'm aware of, but I'll be honest, it's been about close to 30 years now. So that field has probably migrated far beyond what I kept track of.
And then you decided to become a doctor.
So I guess initially for me, when I was finishing undergrad, my sole intent was to go do bench science. And I had an advisor, his name was Paul Brem, that had basically pulled me aside and said, you're a pretty young guy and grant funding is getting extremely difficult for the sciences. And you might choose to try and get a dual degree, being an MD and a PhD, so that you have access to other type of funding for your research. And if I applied for the programs, they're funded programs. So it didn't cost me basically a mortgage to go to medical school. So I took the free education and figured I'd apply it somehow, even if it was just for grant funding. And 7 years into the program, I actually changed my mind and went for clinical medicine instead of staying in the lab.
Wow. 7 years of work. 4 years was enough of medical school for me. And why did you decide to become a pediatrician then?
It just, when I did that rotation and then followed with the sub-internship, for the first time, something actually clicked and it felt more proper than a lab. So I actually rolled with it and applied for residency at the last minute.
Oh, wow. Wow. And I just have to ask you a personal question.
Sure.
So did you speak Spanish still or no?
I don't speak particularly well, and that's despite the fact that I was born in Mexico and moved here only when I was 2 years old. But my family didn't speak, at least my parents didn't speak Spanish much in the house. And my grandparents had a habit of trying to avoid us understanding them by rotating languages every 3-4 sentences. My grandparents in common spoke 9 languages. So by the time you figured out what language they were yip yapping in, they were gone to the next language. So keeping track of it was actually hard. And I think a lot of times when I actually try to speak Spanish, it's probably Italian, Ladino, and a couple of other things thrown in there that I'm not even aware is not Spanish.
Oh, how very interesting. And I don't know when you got your MBA, but was it after you had started your practice?
I started my MBA while I was working for the practice that I started with after graduation from residency. And they had multiple sites. And I did it primarily because I just thought it was going to be interesting, but I figured it would apply if I had decided to stay on for partnership there. I ended up breaking off and going solo before I was eligible for partnership, and finished the MBA probably after my second year, I guess, in private practice. I took about 4 years to finish it because I did it part-time. I did it at night, but I did go in person as opposed to one of the online programs. And I did not actually do a healthcare related MBA. I went for finance. So it was a more formal.
And that's interesting to me. Why finance?
I think from my view when I was starting it, part of it was trying to think of if I ever used it for another career. And I assume that if you have the baseline understandings, you could apply it to your field. And if you take something that's applied to only a specific field, it might have such a skew in terms of the education that it might not necessarily be as applicable, or you might not learn things, I guess, in their pure sense, just their applied sense.
Well, I find that fascinating. It's
You know what, the online MBAs, I wouldn't knock them. They're actually pretty good because doctors are really busy and they don't have time to go in. That's why when I was going to do it, I was going to go in person, but basically the truth of the matter is it was on a Tuesday night and I have band practice on Tuesday. So that's why I didn't go in person.
I lived fairly close at the time to Hofstra, which is where I did the MBA.
Yeah, that's the one.
Just in terms of my personal learning style, if I would have been doing it online, I think it would have been a disaster for me. I need to be in person for those things.
It depends on the personality. Like I would get up at 6 o'clock in the morning and do some stuff. I'd come back late, do another hour or two worth of work. Most doctors are overachievers anyway. So they're going to get through it. You just have to be held accountable.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
And so now you've gotten into technology, but without formal training.
I mean, I think I've always been a little bit of a tech junkie. I think the first computer I had was a Mac II, or an Apple II, I guess it was.
Herb can beat you with that. He had a Commodore 64.
I messed with those at summer camp, and that's where I learned BASIC was on one of those. But that and Ped computers, I think, was the other one I had access to before I had my own.
Yeah, do you remember back then, Tandy, Radio Shack used to make one that you program with DOS, and the most you could do is have it scroll your name from the top of the screen to the bottom in black and white.
Yeah.
But it was a beginning. And so but what is the right now that you like most about technology? Is it SQL databases or?
I mean, I think I like web design probably most in terms of there's a visual component, so there's an artsy aspect to it. But I think in terms of the tech that I practically use most was just using SQL to pull information out of databases so I can analyze it and then make better decisions using the information.
Yeah.
And then do you use anything like R or Python when you're trying to get the analytics?
I haven't started working with Python. I bought a couple of books a couple of months ago to start learning JavaScript, but I haven't gotten around to it yet. I know a little Delphi because the EMR that we utilize uses Delphi for the report writer. So in order to, if I want to do school forms and stuff, I needed to know some Delphi just for layout purposes. But I wouldn't say I'm an expert in any type of computer programming. I've learned what I need to get what I need done.
Well, let me tell you let me make a plug for Jason's genius on SQL. Remember, Jason, when we started to do the in-office COVID testing, the rapid testing, and in order to do it, you had to upload this data. It was, I am not joking, 1,000 columns wide. And not every column had data. One column had data, 5 had no data, another 3 had data, another 23 didn't have any data. and the sequel report had to be like that. So we were starting the COVID testing, and I wrote to Jason. I said, Jason, what do we have to do? He said, oh, no problem. An hour later, here, do this. He gives me the sequel code. I plug it into Office Practicum. It didn't quite work at the very beginning, but then after one or two, bug fixes, we've been using it ever since. And, the New York State is a very, very clunky system. And, they want this. I mean, talk about that spreadsheet. Wasn't that ridiculous, that spreadsheet?
It was.
It was ridiculous.
It took me about 8 or 10 hours, but I had a gun to my head because they basically said you have to do this week. So you can.
And then he shared it with the community. Good Samaritan that Jason is, and we've used it, and it worked fine. It's still I still use it.
Yeah, we do too. I cleaned the script up a little bit so it looks prettier, but functionally it's the same thing.
Yeah.
And in your focus and practice management, you've done a lot of things, right? But what is that? Is it the revenue cycle machine that interests you the most?
I think it's just I'm a tinkerer in general.
Okay.
For what it's worth, I actually stepped down over the summer as the managing partner of my practice. Dr. J. I took over my practice. From that perspective, I'm still seeing patients and actually have more patient contact than I've had probably in the last decade as a result. But for me, my goal was to be able to have basically a multidisciplinary practice or a complete practice. So over the years, we've added services like lactation nurses, nutritionists, social workers, that are both clinical social workers as well as social workers that are responsible for care coordination to help people with their referrals and whatever else they possibly need. And obviously seeking to make a living off of it while doing it. And not everything is easy to make a living off of because the system's not set up that way. So it's really trying to run a tight ship so that you could offer everything you want to offer and make a living doing it. But the more stuff you try to bring into a practice, the harder it is to keep it afloat proper.
Well, if you have partners and associates that are in it for the greater good of the practice as opposed to the greater good of the physician, you can be successful.
Yeah, but he's right. I mean, if you're doing counseling and you got PhD psychologists and you're not getting paid for their salary, that's a non-starter.
Yeah. So
you have to figure out at least how to break even.
Yeah.
And that's not always easy. And so, yeah, I mean, you're super smart. But you enjoyed managing the practice.
No, definitely. It's fun, and it's fun to see something blossom and grow in the way that you had in your mind. It's a ton of work. It's really what it is. Also, at the end of the day, you have to be willing to put in the hours and to be able to see something through. And sometimes it's painful, but
yeah. Well, anything that's good is painful.
Exactly.
You got to work hard.
And startups are very difficult. Very difficult. It's few people that have your skill that can do a startup and then remain as the managing partner for many years, because the skills of somebody that manages a mature business are so different from the entrepreneur that's starting it out. When you're starting up, you clean your own toilet, you do everything because there's no money.
I put the original tile work and hung the drywall in the original office.
Yeah, I mean that's how you do it. Elbow grease, right?
I mean that's a personality thing. I think I ran Cat 5 wiring in the original office. That's what you had to do.
Yeah.
Right now, when you still do that, even when you become a bigger enterprise. Like right now, we built out a new office and we had to move our call center. And then one of the new doctors was driving down Comac Road and she saw myself and Dr. Nick pushing some chairs, office chairs from one building to the other. And in her head, she said to me, that's a little bit weird. How can my boss be pushing chairs down the street to the other office? It had to be done then. That's what we do. We resolve problems.
Yep.
You know? That's
Also,
an
when your
entrepreneur.
staff sees that you're willing to do it,
Yeah, they'll do it.
they'll work with you also. They know you're just part of the team.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
think a lot of the physicians, they lose sight of that. And it says, I got a guy, I got a person, I don't want to get my hands dirty. But we're veering off of the main topic of the MBA. Is it important?
Wow. Well, we're
or
gonna
not?
get there. Uh, we're gonna get there. But to your point, I when I started the pizza emergency room, I had one of my partners working. It was the first week, right? And I went in that whole week, and for the evening shift, and he needed a kid to get an X-ray, and the kid was in the wheelchair, and I pushed a wheelchair to the X-ray department and got it done because I didn't want to wait for the orderly from the hospital to go get him. And it was the most fascinating dynamic. Claude said to me, "You know what? I know you're a good doctor. I know you're a really tough administrator, but today you earned my respect. You made sure that my day went well, and you weren't embarrassed or lazy or anything. If you had to push a wheelchair to make my day happen, you would." I'm like, yeah, that's what I'm here to do. Make sure that you can see the patients.
Yeah.
Um,
And seeing
that
the
makes
patients, the administrators that see the patients, I think that's when physicians lose sight of everything. They go into the admin side and then they forget about patient care.
Yeah.
And they don't know the doctor's pain if you're not seeing patients.
No,
When I get a young doctor complain to me, oh my God, I got to see this, I got to do that. I often tell them, you know what, the easy part of my day is seeing patients.
yeah,
It really
Yeah.
is.
it's a lot easier. So I'm going to switch the question a little bit around. Do you think you could have achieved this amount of success, which you have in your life, in your career, without having gone through the MBA route?
The answer is yes. I don't think that the material is stuff that you can't access other ways. It's just like anything else. You could either be taught and shorten your learning curve, or you could go do trial by fire, make a few extra mistakes, hopefully not costly ones, and get to the same place. But you could learn a lot of your medicine by going and reading up to date and reading some journal articles about a condition and like teaching yourself what it is you need to know.
That doesn't make you a
Sometimes it's
doctor.
easier. It's
doesn't
easier
make
when
you an
somebody's
MD.
already learned it.
But that doesn't make you an MD just because you read up to date.
Well, it doesn't
That's-
get you. It doesn't get you a degree, but
Correct.
like you don't need an MBA to practice medicine. But there's certain aspects of what you learned in the program that probably you applied in some positive way, I hope.
So out of the whole MBA, and with a caveat that it was in finance, what do you think were the most valuable lessons that you applied as you were managing your company?
I think if you were going to distill, I guess, the positives that you could get out of a program, I think the biggest one that I ever applied was probably operations management.
Yep.
And using more rigorous techniques to try to trim any extra steps out of a system, as well as like for quality control purposes. And there are books on Lean Six Sigma, which is primarily for industries, but there are books even that apply it to service industries. And that type of mentality goes a long way in running an office. Even if you don't do it the real anal calculating kind of way, just the mere principles of it are very, very beneficial. I think having taken formal accounting classes helps, even if you have other people that physically do the books, for you to be able to read their reports, for you to understand them, and even just calculating when you're purchasing stuff, whether you're purchasing, leasing, what terms and all that, it just gives you a better background for it. Some marketing is obviously helpful because you realize there's a big science behind it. And I had never considered even walking into a supermarket until I had taken marketing. And one of my professors had talked about just paying attention to where everything's put. He said, nothing in this place is random. He had pointed out that they very often use stuff that looks like chalkboards, because back in the day when they had open markets and you didn't know what you were going to have for the day and you needed to write down today's catch and what the price was, you did it on a chalkboard. But they might have printed posters that look that way, but it's to make you think that it's brand new and fresh and that they didn't even have time to make a sign yet.
You know why? You learned this in marketing, also in the MBA. Why do they put the milk at the very back of the store?
So you have to walk through the whole
And
thing.
everybody buys milk, so you have to
Every-
walk through everything. Yep,
And they lose money on eggs and milk because everybody gets it.
Correct.
That's the first study of loss leader.
Yeah.
Everybody gets milk and eggs. And if you're at Wegmans, at least in Virginia, you can buy wine, and you buy a bottle of wine where they have a 200% markup, and they make up more in that one bottle of wine than, all the milk and all the eggs you bought that day.
Yeah.
So that's fascinating. So let's go back to something you said, because I'm not sure that everybody in our audience understands what Lean Sigma is.
Sure.
So, or Six Sigma. So Six Sigma is a concept that came mostly from Toyota, in which they try to eliminate all variance, so that the quality of the product is always consistently good. I found it very difficult on how you apply that to human beings, because the reason the Apple computer is such a genius is because every Apple computer is made the same way and integrated to the software. So they're eliminating a lot of variances. If you buy a Dell computer, if I order 3 Dell computers today, each one's going to have different components in it, just because of their just-in-time chain of supply chain. And so that's where the bugs start. So how can you apply that concept of eliminate variance to a clinical office where each patient's different, each doctor's different, and each morning's different?
I would say more in the types of routines that you're using, whether it's for, I guess, documenting vaccinations that were administered. Like, if you don't want any mistakes made because it's got clinical significance to it. So what controls can you have in place so that you're only making a mistake 1 in a million times, which I believe is where the Six Sigma comes from, because it's 6 standard deviations from the mean or something. But I think that their goal was like no more than 1 in a million type error rate. And what's the least amount of controls you need in place to make sure you're not making mistakes? So like in my office, like that, they have to sign, like they make sure they fill out paperwork, so that we know what vaccine's being given, and it's signed by the parent, and we put the sticker from the vial on it, and that gets scanned into a chart. So if something looks wonky on inventory at the end of the day, we have a master copy of something that we know for a fact is accurate, because it will always at least have those minimum elements in it to prevent having an error. And doing a physical inventory at the end of the day, and comparing it with the computer system lets you know that you should be on point.
but that seems to be double the work, Jason.
It depends what your issue is, right? So if it's an issue of major clinical significance, I'm willing to do a little extra work to make sure there's no errors. For something that's not as critical, you might not have the same degree of controls in place, but it's that balance between running lean and which is eliminating steps that are not adding value to your process, and Six Sigma, which is more of a quality control aspect. It's a give and take between the two to some extent, because if you run lean enough and are trying to get rid of all value or non-value adding steps, it's possible you're going to leave something available for error that you weren't seeking.
And so one of the key ideas or processes in Six Sigma or Lean Six Sigma is the idea of measuring data.
Yes.
Because what you don't measure, you don't know where you stand.
Yep.
And 2, you can't improve.
Correct.
And so that must have informed some of your decision making as you see where you stood, and then you could actually become more efficient and effective, give better quality, and spend less effort.
So in terms of workflows in an office, like Office Practicum, which is the EMR that we use in the office, actually has a pretty nifty feature in it where you could set stages for your, I guess, the patient's flow. So their point of arrival in the parking lot versus their point of arrival in the waiting room, when they get put in a room, when the medical assistant is done, like each step in the process, you could create as a stage, and it'll actually track the time in each process. So we utilize those numbers to try to figure out staffing for medical assistants, to try to figure out staffing for front desk, basically constantly looking at rate limiting steps in a process based on the time people are taking in that. We've done studies where we've segregated it by age, because different ages tend to have different effort required to get them to comply sometimes with testing or even just getting them measured. We've looked at it in terms of the diagnostic tests and how long they take the process to figure out what stage they need to be taken care of in, and whether people are remaining in rooms for certain procedures or not. But it's all based on the data that we got from marking each stage.
And then do you measure and track the total length of stay for your
Yes.
patients?
You could see it at each stage, and you could do sums of all of the stages and the like. So,
And from a marketing perspective, why is that length of stay important to your practice?
I think the biggest part of the length of stay that would actually matter to somebody, or I think the one that I've gotten from feedback from parents, is that they just want to be addressed quickly when they show up. Like, an appointment time means something to people. So if they're expecting to be have a 2:00 appointment, you want them in their room at 2:00, or at the very least, when they call at 2:00, that you're telling them exactly where to go and that somebody is more or less going to be waiting there to attend to them. And you don't want a medical assistant, for example, that's rooming them and getting them set up, to leave the room and then sit in the room for 20 minutes. That agitates people. So it's to make sure that their visit runs smoothly and that there's constant contact with them. That's generally what brings them satisfaction, at least that I found.
You're
You're not
correct.
making them feel like they wasted their time.
Yeah, but they want access to care and they want quick care.
Yeah.
Hopefully they want quality of care, but sometimes I start to wonder if they really care about quality, as long as they get what they need.
Yeah, I think they have a harder time distinguishing quality because they don't have the training necessarily always, but they pick up on whether or not you seem rushed, and that you've given them whatever time they felt they needed for that day. And that might be different depending on their issue. But if you're careful about how you run a schedule, you will run pretty close on time all the time. And every now and then, if somebody blows you up, there's other ways to have people cross-covering patients and whatnot, or recognizing when the wheels are falling off and being able to reach people that are further out on the schedule and make sure that they don't arrive when they thought they were arriving, and explain to them so that they are treated with respect, and that you respect their time and their day as well.
Well,
Do you think
time,
when the wheel falls off, do you think that's due to the patient, the physician himself, the computer? What makes the wheel fall off?
It could be anything. It could be a kid that had a seizure in your office, and
How often does that happen?
there's stuff. None of them are particularly often, but there's different
Right.
flavors, right? There's the medical stuff that goes on where somebody said that they had a cough and they come in and they're obviously in respiratory distress and take more
Okay.
work.
Got you.
Um, there's patient stuff where they got a flat and they came 15 minutes late or something.
Okay.
There's weather related. We've had the power go out for 10 minutes. I mean, stuff happens.
But I think the doctors, especially the new age doctors, they look at the number of patients. They want to, they think the numbers are too much. I don't really care too much about the number. As long as you go home on time and you don't bring work home, if you see 1 million patients, who cares? As long as you go home on time and you do good medicine.
I mean, I don't know if you tailor your schedules this way much, but there's folks that are going to take longer, and we have different time set up for them also.
Yeah.
So
That's fine. Yeah.
So a lot of things will take the wheels off your schedule. I mean, your computer in the room that you walked into, all of a sudden decided it's not going to work, or the server stops working, or the lighting goes away. The telephone system goes down, and all these things happen. Even if they only happen once every 5 years, when they do happen, it's tremendously stressful. But you're correct. So there are people who actually have studied customer satisfaction in medicine, which is kind of an oxymoron. If I just broke my arm, there's really nothing that can make me happy, other than if you could take my broken arm away, which is not a possibility.
Yeah.
But the time that the patient arrives to the time that the patient enters the exam room is a key driver of patient satisfaction. And the overall amount of time that they are in the office is a key driver of patient satisfaction. So once you get to the tail end of an hour, people are not happy. They don't feel like their time has been well spent.
Right.
And then the other things are silliness, right? But it's what they can judge as value. If your trash can is up to the rim with, paper, and there's dust all over the desk, they feel that your quality is poor because the place is not clean, and it's a medical office. It should be clean.
Yeah.
If
And
you
another place that the people look at is, if you think about it, when you go to a restaurant and the toilet, when you look at the toilet, if it's a clean toilet restroom, you think highly of the restaurant. If the toilet is dark and dirty looking, you don't think highly of the doctor's office.
That's true. It's cleanliness. And I mean, we do the same. I mean, at least I do the same. If I walk into a restaurant and there's no one there, I get a little sketched out. It's like, I'm the only one that wants to eat here. There must be a reason why no one else wants to eat here. And it probably is not very good. So yeah, it's hard for them to know what quality is. But that's that. So that's one thing that you track, is that the time they're there, so you can take away the funnels and improve the efficiency of the practice. What else do you measure that you think is really important?
Measure from staff, or measure for clientele, or
Overall, what do you think is, from clientele, do you do any customer satisfaction surveys?
I'm part of a larger organization, Allied Physicians Group, and
Yes.
they do send out questionnaires, and we get the feedback from them. So some granular questions, and tell you like what percentage of the people are happy about this, that, or the other thing.
Okay.
I mean, we do obviously look online, but I think the majority of people that are actually right online, I don't know that most clients actually do it. So you're really getting a very slim, I guess, view of clients if you're going based on online ratings and comments. But if you do see something pop up a few times, then you know that there may be something that has to get addressed. And you had mentioned phone systems earlier, but we had issues with our phone systems this year when we had switched from one company to another, and it was a nightmare for us. And we were working with the company day in, day out, and it was not necessarily going as quick as I would have liked, because I would have liked it fixed that day. But it caused some people to even tee off online, but it gave you at least a format that you could answer them back and explain what's going on and what you're doing to fix it. But I actually just ask a lot of parents periodically. I know folks that have been with the practice for a very long time, and I'll ask them what they feel about certain changes or what they would like to see, because we're trying to make a practice that's meeting their needs, and their needs have changed with time. So we started incorporating a lot more mental health and bringing in social workers and providers that are capable of managing some of their medications and the like, primarily because they weren't able to get appointments anywhere else. They would try to get in with a psychiatrist. It would take them 3 months. They would try to get somebody to talk to, like a counselor, and they would be calling random people and meeting 6 of them and not knowing what to do. So it was a need that they expressed consistently, and that we tried to meet for them because we know it's out there. So a lot of it is just still interpersonal, talking to them in terms of that type of work. I think for us, being able to figure out in terms of timing, like how many referrals somebody could process in an hour, how many phone calls they can answer in an hour, how long they're spending on phone calls, that type of data does help us in terms of with staffing, whether or not we're having people do multiple roles as opposed to a single role, whether or not they're doing roles for part of the day because for their personal satisfaction, they get bored doing the same thing all day and needing to rotate what their job is just to keep them engaged. Like there's a lot of, I guess, different data that we collect, although not necessarily always statistically, but it is data that we'll look at.
And so when you are, say I'm your front desk person, and
Yes.
you're collecting data on how long it takes me to check in a patient, greet the patient, check him in, find out whether they owe the practice money, and then have a MA put them in a room. Do you give them a scorecard once you figure out what I say? Just to say I'm supposed to do 40 of those a day. Is there a scorecard that says to me as your front desk person, these are your expectations?
That's the degree of statistics, as I was saying. Like, I don't go there, and it's primarily like most of the time you could kind of tell like who's meeting and who's not meeting because you're seeing the satisfaction differences. And you'll start seeing people backing up, and they're not supposed to back up. So you're trying to figure out if there's a problem. When things are running smoothly, I know that they're doing what we are expecting based on expected volumes and the like. So I don't do it granular necessarily by employee for front desk. And part of it's that I can't, I guess if you did it over a longer period of time, you would have a nice distribution, but the phones are not the same in the morning as they are in the afternoon. The phones are not necessarily the same on Monday as they are on Wednesday. And that to start getting that granular with people with different schedules is really difficult to do. And I don't know how much value I would get out of it.
Okay. And then how did you, because this is a question nobody seems to have the answer to, how can you make money on mental health in pediatrics? Because it's a very tight margin.
I don't know that we're turning what you'd call like major profit, but we're not losing money on it either. It's pretty close to break even. The no-show rate is a huge variable that has to be controlled with the mental health. If people are not showing for their appointments, you either have to have a mechanism of some type of financial penalty for them for not showing, or if they have more than a no-show or two, you can't keep working with that family. That's your margin right there. The second you have more than one or two people in a day that don't show up for their visit for mental health, you're losing money without a doubt.
Wow. And then you must, I assume you track no-show rates too on a general population.
Yes.
And what do you aim for? Less than 5%?
Yes.
Okay. And do you have away from the mental illness people, a policy if somebody has been no-show twice?
They're spoken to. Like,
okay.
we explain it. We're like, again, when you're upfront with people and treat them with respect and they understand what your problem is, they usually will work with you. I mean, there's obviously derelicts in every society, but most people, if you're explaining to them that you're really trying to provide them a service, but that this is not something that's easy to do, and the reason that they came to you is because they couldn't find it elsewhere. They understand that there's a problem and that you need certain things from them, just like they need something from you. And it's not that, like, if they call us the day before, like, we'll work with them. We have people trade appointments. If you have another doctor's appointment in the afternoon and you're respectful to me and you call, like, I could usually get parents to trade appointment times for one off because they know it's going to be them another day that needs that same favor. So if you're upfront with people, they usually work with you.
You know what, Herb? Again, I think we veered off topic once again. I think we have Jason here to tell us about his MBA. Does a doctor need an MBA? You're talking about practice management, chip heart stuff that you can get at any, user conference. We know this stuff already. They don't know about the MBA because I had asked one of these illustrious consultants way back when, should I get an MBA? And their answer to me was, why would you bother? Because you learned everything that you can learn inside your practice, which is true. It is true. But why is an MBA important for a physician? It depends on what age. I think they have like the MD MBA programs for the 28-year-old, the 30-year-old physician. I think that kid doesn't even know how to do medicine yet. He needs to learn medicine. He has to get that under his belt for a while. Then he has to get involved with the MBA stuff. I think they give him some extra classes. They graduate the MD, MBA, and then they get pulled into the hospital administration side, telling people like Jason and yourselves how to do medicine when they don't really even know how to do medicine because they never practiced it yet, really, that long. And I think that's where the quandary comes about. I think you have to have an old guy like Jason and like myself and you, after many, many years of experience, then go back and do the MBA later.
I mean, it helps with certain things like if you have to engage people that are in the business realm, you speak their
Yes.
language.
Yes.
That makes a big difference.
It gives you leverage. You know how many times I use when I do contract negotiations? I tell them, listen, I'm not just a dumb doctor. I'm different. And the MBA does it because they all think that we are dumb doctors. We don't know business.
I don't know if it jaded you with certain things, but like certain things that jaded me was when reps would come, say with the copay cards for medicines, like it kills me. Like I just find that type of practice deplorable because I understand what it is now, where I wouldn't have given it much thought, I guess, when I started out. I'm like, great. So the parent is really happy that you saved them their $30 copay, but the insurance company got tagged for an extra $180 and everybody's rates are going up as a result. And it's because that's a dishonest practice. But it's common, but I wouldn't have really given it a whole hell of a lot of thought probably had I not gone through some coursework.
Correct.
So he kind of shared with us what he thought it was important is one is the ability to measure quality and decrease error rates.
That's for the strategy, but there's also parts of other topics. I mean, the strategy is great. Leadership is a big one right now.
But for him, his experience was one, eliminate error to the 1 in a million rate. 2, he learned accounting so he can understand a balance sheet.
Right.
So when his accountants are telling him what's happening in his business, he speaks their language.
Correct.
3, he learned about marketing, which he didn't know was a science. Most of the things of marketing is as some very bubbly human being who can put a couple of pictures up and put an ad somewhere with a jingle, and that's not really how marketing works today. And 4th, he just said it right. What was the 4th thing you said? Oh, you speak the language of the business people. So that was what he got out of the MBA. Yeah. Now, what do you do? So now you learn your marketing in the MBA. What do you do for your office? Because what's important is if you learn something, how do you apply it?
Yeah. I mean, I guess some little things, even, I don't know if I'd put this in the marketing, but just understanding that colors mean things to people, body language means things to people. Like there were choices when we were setting up exam rooms, like, are you going to have laptop computers that you're bringing in and out? Are you going to have desktop computers? How are they going to be mounted on the wall? Are you going to have a desk? Things like that. And we actually chose desktops at a desk because I thought that the body language and the way the rooms are set up is the doctor's always facing the patient. The monitor is not in a way that it's obstructing, but they are coming in and sitting down at a desk, which makes them appear more relaxed and not as much in a rush, where they're standing up at a podium, basically trying to bang away and type at something, so that it's a body language thing for them. There are things that some of the pharma companies will drop off that are posters that have a lot of good information on them, but we will very often either replicate that kind of information or actually mutilate their posters and remove logos. And the reason why is I don't want somebody to have an impression that we might be in cahoots with that company. Yes, they provided proper education, but their logo means something to a parent. And they might think that we're getting a kickback, which is not accurate, or something else that's more sinister just because they saw it. And just being cognizant of that, the types of colors we use to paint the office, the one thing that you guys mentioned in terms of cleanliness, like these are detail type oriented stuff that you realize the impact because they drill it into your head in school.
That's right. Yeah. So that is the advantage of the MBA.
Right.
You learn that as opposed to reading 10 times on Yelp. Dr. Bravo's office is filthy. Dr. Bravo's office is filthy. You've learned that before you get that negative feedback.
Right. I think another important thing that you learned that you failed to mention is the leadership. All right. We're all leaders. I mean, from minute one in residency, after you became a resident, you became a leader, right, of the team. You're a leader of the crew. You're a senior resident. You're a leader of the organization, chief resident. Then you're the attending. You're a leader of everybody. But I don't think every physician really, we got that, army mentality of, I've done it like this, so you have to do it like that. And I think there's a lot of physician burnout because of that.
Yeah.
What do you think about that, Jason?
I think that I didn't take really per se classes that taught me how to be a leader. I think to some extent, the people that are practice managers are probably to some extent have a certain mentation about them in the first place, which is why they ended up in that position. I think that some of the group projects you do probably gave you practice in
Right.
an environment that you were not going to cause damage in. So you got a practice ground of problem solving with other intelligent people and setting up different platforms or whatever. I don't know what projects you had to do when you went through your program, but I know we had something called a capstone course.
Yep.
That basically you were running company simulations with a small group of people, and every couple of weeks you'd rotate and be with different partners with a different set of problems. And over the course of a semester, you probably ran like 5 simulations. So you had to learn to interact with other people and brainstorm and go through all the different processes. And there were people that took the reins and other people that were probably a little less inclined to.
Yep.
So I'm going to push back a little bit about what George said.
Yeah.
I think there's a difference between a leader and a manager. And obviously all physicians at some point become managers of a team. Even when you're in training, you're a senior resident, you have junior residents, medical students in your team, and you're supposed to manage that team. But that's not the same as leaders. I think there's a lot of managers, but leaders are very few. And the leader's job is very different. I'm not sure that an MBA, I never went the MBA route because 2 or 3 people told me I didn't need to.
Probably should.
But I don't think an MBA can teach you leadership. They can teach you to be a manager. I think there's a lot more to leadership than just knowing how things work. And what I see in Jason, for example, is he wants no critical errors on his patients. That's leadership. That's not management.
Right.
He wants to be respectful of the time of his patients and that his patients are treated with respect. That's leadership. That's not management. Management is totally different. And yes, every doctor has to manage their team.
Right.
But leading teams is a whole other level. It's another level. It takes a lot of vision and values and, trying to figure out what storms are coming in the future as you're trying to drive that ship through an ocean that sometimes is very scary.
In private practice, there are a lot of managers, and that's why it falls apart a little bit.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So
And
you have to get the team together, bring it on home. We had a meeting with one of our new doctors. She's like 2 or 3 weeks into the job. I want to have a meeting with you. Okay. What do you think the meeting was about? There's an awful lot of patients to see. Because they were doing from residency like 2 patients an hour, nothing, all of a sudden influx. So I had a choice of saying, well, you should have seen my training when I joined the practice. Dr. Reichman said to me, welcome to RBK Pediatrics, Dr. Halegoua. Room 11 is your first patient. Good luck. Or you just talk, be nice, and it'll be okay.
So Jason, how would you handle a new physician that comes in and says, I can't see 16 patients a day?
I don't know how George you handle it in yours. I could tell you that the first 2-3 weeks that a new a new resident comes out, their schedule's probably even a little lighter than they might have been during residency, but it probably takes us a year or so to get them to a full schedule. Because
they were doing
the gradual building process. I don't want them making mistakes and feeling rushed either. They're not as confident. They don't have the experience. They're also trying to build a rapport with clientele they've never met before. And them not making as much cash that first year is better for them psychologically, but it also helps them establish a practice because they've had more time they get funneled a lot of the new patients. So they're spending more time with them. They're getting to know them. They're getting their own following. And those people are going to then say, I love this new doc. And their practice grows. And the more they do something, the faster they naturally get at it. When they resist getting faster, that takes a little bit of hammering. And they usually, like, you just have to sometimes show them like basically numbers, and they usually can roll with that. Apropos what you were talking about before, when you were talking even managers versus leaders, one of the things that I did take from an MBA was, and it was one of the first steps we did when we opened the practice, was making a very formal mission and vision statement. And every decision in the practice has always been measured against that before it's enacted. So it's always a matter of staying true to that. And so the wording of your mission statement is really your goals. And it was kept pretty simple. Like, our practice, our goal was to be providing the best medical care we possibly can, but to be doing it with the best customer service we can, and leveraging technology as far as we could to provide both of those. And that was the simple mission that we went to, and everything we've done has been to that. It always has to speak there. And if you could get your employees to understand that, so that every decision they're making is with the same mentality, it goes a long way.
Yeah, our mission statement was primary care when you want it, urgent care when you need it, services provided by physicians. That's what we do. You know, it's pretty simple. And both these things, where were they learned? MBA.
Yeah.
So there is some benefit to the MBA, I think. But it depends when you take it, what phase in life.
But, and I guess the different way to ask that is, do you think you guys could not have reached the success you did without the MBA?
I think it would have taken a little longer. I probably would have made a few extra mistakes along the way. And again, hopefully they wouldn't have been like costly in some way or another, but just, you're always building off of things that you know in life. So if somebody gave you a cookie cutter way of learning certain things, you learned that a little quicker, so you were able to learn more advanced stuff on your own after. I think it just shaves the time and the effort into getting to a certain place. I think that most folks that were able to get through medical school are more than intelligent enough to figure out these other things. They are somewhat like a science. It's just a different application of it. And it would depend if somebody was willing to take the time to invest and learn that stuff on their own, or if it really was daily trial by fire, which I think it is for a lot of people. And I think that's why some people struggle with a lot of what they struggle with. Some of it's probably contracting. Some of it's probably the way they set up their office or the way they view their staff. But if you're going to learn about the School of Hard Knocks, some people get lucky and some people have a harder time with it.
And do you think the MBA taught you certain skills that, you know, you're talking about, that the skill I'm trying to get to is, it seems to me when we talk to a lot of people, two things are key to success of any practice. It's relationships and the ability to change, to learn new things. Do you think that's innate, or is that something that the MBA teaches you how important those two things are?
I think for me, it probably helped more getting into a client's head, and trying to even help them, if asking them questions, asking them the right questions on ways that we can assist them better than we already do. So
I think most people have it innately. It's inside. I think it helps to bring it out.
Yeah, because I mean, we've seen some practices where the leader, the manager, the leader, or the owner of the practice, whichever it is unwilling to change.
If you're not flexible, you're not going to succeed.
And it's impossible, right? Or the leader, the owner, or the manager of the practice doesn't want to talk about data. Forget it. I mean, just forget it. You don't even know how many kids you're seeing every day. You know, why go beyond that? Yeah. But I'm not sure that could be a learned skill. I think some people are able to do that, and we kind of self-select. So we read more, and we're more willing to go get an MBA, or we're willing to go to get a capstone course or certified as a physician executive.
And
other
that's a
people,
good thing, the certified physician executive. Actually, that's how I started it.
and
And
some people are not willing to make that change, right?
yeah,
I,
I think the best thing that we did with the certified physician executive, that's how I started getting into the MBA. It's like a baby MBA, I guess, and there's CME credits. So I did it with one of my senior doctors who's ahead of me. I said, let's do this together. We can do the classes together, work together. I think it changed him from the old ways of doing things, and that allowed the practice to propel. Whereas I don't think if he would have done it, if he didn't do the certified physician executive piece, maybe he would have continued in the same mistakes that the senior guys did before him. And I think it helped in the culture change.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know about you, George, but did you find that when COVID hit, that your education allowed you to adapt more rapidly to the environmental changes and to anticipate and avoid catastrophe during a time where businesses got blown up?
Holy smokes, everybody that went out of business stayed home. How many times did I talk to you during the pandemic? What ideas do we have? You gave me the 10th idea. We put it outside in the parking lot. We did checkups outside, virtual, inside, because people didn't want to come into the office. Lots and lots of, things, but that's why we came out of it and we're still okay.
Yeah.
That's why a lot of people are not.
Now, Jason, I know Allied has a big marketing department, but for your own pod,
Yes.
do you, and was this informed by the MBA education, do you set aside a amount of dollars a year that you reinvest in marketing?
We do very little marketing, actually, my division. Like I code the website myself. So like our practices website, I maintain it. I do a little bit of a blog here and there. But for the most part, most of the marketing is taken care of by the parents on the mommy groups and Facebook and all that stuff.
Right.
It's word of mouth. We use very few Google ads and things along those lines. And it's really just to make sure that somebody that's just randomly searching like Pediatrician in Medford, which is where my office is, would actually find us fairly quickly. But the marketing budget for our office is really, it's tiny. And I've never sought it out. I don't think most people find a doctor that way. They find it by asking friends.
Okay. But you do track how your new patients come in from a marketing perspective?
I
Like
mean,
who
they're
referred
asked at the
them,
beginning,
or
like if they got referred. We don't keep track of it, but and we did it a lot more early on. It was like well in the 90% were people that were sent by a friend, a family member, or their schools, like mommy group, or I call them mommy groups. There's like Facebook pages for every school district, school, and they'll constantly be throwing things out there. Do you know a podiatrist in the area, a pediatrician in the area? And that's where a lot of people get their stuff. They don't randomly go searching around. Some parents would report that they used not just Yelp, but like Google and whatnot. But that was a far smaller number of people than got it from friends and family.
in the website, you like the programming side of it, right? So but also the artistic side. Well, if you were to tell a pediatrician what are the top 3 things, and you didn't learn this in the MBA, what are the top 3 things that a website should have for a pediatrician?
That's a tougher one, because I'm constantly trying to redesign it. You obviously need to be able to contact the place and
Yes.
have that basic information. I think the stuff that I try to put on there is stuff that is either convenient for the parent. So if there's forms that they might need, there's sections they could obtain them easily, like a PDF to print out. That there's some basic information, like we utilize something that Remedy Connect had makes, and it uses certain, I think, the Barton Schmidt protocols, where they can get some basic information on drug dosing and certain conditions to figure out, do I need to call you now? Do I need to go to an ER? Can I just wait till morning? So basic information like that. And then the other stuff is what distinguishes you from others. And again, I think if you have a crisp looking site, when it's similar to the bathrooms and whether your office looks clean, if your site looks clean, organized, and modern, it speaks to your practice being the same. If you have a site that looks like it was from the late 80s when people were first tinkering on webs, they probably are going to have that view of you right out of the chute, and that's not the good first impression, because even if they find you on Facebook, they will check out your website, and if it looks archaic and it looks sloppy, it's a reflection, and that's their first impression, and that's not what you want.
And so you think people are using the website after they already have heard from you?
Yeah, I don't think they're randomly hitting it. I think that's a very small minority are randomly hitting it, or hitting it because they Googled by your town. Most people are looking into your practice because somebody recommended them to do so.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think you're absolutely right. If the website's not modern and organized, it gives the wrong impression. And one of the worst things is links that don't work.
Yeah.
You know, there's a link there and I click on it and it takes me nowhere. It's so aggravating.
Yeah.
And not being able to have the address and the phone in the top right corner, so that, you know, I can, because sometimes I'm looking at a website just because I need the phone number. That's all I need. And I don't want to go about to the contact us section of the website. All I need is the address, or because I'm going there, or I need the telephone. Yeah. What else did you think was really important about the MBA that we haven't asked you or talked about?
I think one of the other places it probably helped, and again, this comes down to just numbers and stuff that you could figure out on your own. But like for us, our scheduling is so granular, and being able to look at prior years' data of seasonal data, day of the week data, specific provider data, and to be able to make a schedule that you know you're going to be able to accommodate the expected volumes of sick and maximize your ability to provide appropriate well care, and to do it without running people's schedule into the ground, and making them stay exceptionally late. So we have always gone about differential scheduling based on, as I said, seasons, day of the week, and which providers are working. And up until COVID, it was really, really easy to do. COVID definitely messed that up because we didn't have flu seasons in the middle of July, and like numbers that we previously used to forecast were not necessarily as applicable. But that was a big advantage for us in terms of being able to plan ahead. And it's basically formal training in proper ways to analyze data.
All right. So how do you get that out of OP?
SQL.
Now, I know you were going to go there.
Yeah.
They have great SQL reports. It requires a little bit of a college education to use it, one, and then it gives you nice spreadsheets with thousands of lines.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the one thing that I would hope OP would do in the future, and maybe they'll use you for this, is take these complicated SQL reports and make pretty pictures and dashboards that the doctor can see at a glance that can be useful. You know, I ran, when I made some dashboards for our CIN, I was able to pull just regular reports out of OP, upload them into the dashboard. I made pretty pictures. I was able to tell the appointment time, but it was really cumbersome to pull the reports, run the reports, upload the reports. Doctors don't have time for that.
Yeah, I don't use the reports module as much as I use Excel. I just pull the data that I want out. And I love pivot tables and things like that in Excel, and you can learn a ton that way.
You're correct. Again, you need a little college education for that too.
Yep.
Who has time for that? I need the pictures. I need Cliff Notes as a physician.
Did you learn the pivot tables during your MBA or after that?
You learned it in biostats.
I'm not 100% sure. I probably was tinkering with them before I even went for an MBA.
Okay.
Like I was using spreadsheets when I think the first spreadsheet program I used was Lotus 123.
Yeah. Yeah, I use that too, but I don't know how to use pivot tables or Mike. Is it macro? To program the Excel. I don't know how to do that, but
So let's leave Jason with one final question. Is the MBA worth it for a doctor?
It was for me. I think a lot of it for doctors in general depends on the size of your practice and what your ambition is.
Yeah, I think it was worth it for me also. I'm very happy I did it.
well, maybe I have to go get an MBA then.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah. Is there anything else that we haven't asked you that you think would be important for pediatricians across the country to hear?
Just be respectful of your clients, and just if you know what your demographics require for their own needs, it's easier to meet their expectations and to be willing and flexible to work with them on the terms that they need, because people that live in different areas of the country their clients have totally different needs, and it's not always easy to do things cookie cutter. You have to tailor it to your clients, and your clients change over time, and the demographics of your neighborhoods change over time, and you being able to recognize those changes and to meet the challenges they have is what's going to keep you doing what your mission is, and that's to serve them.
Right. Thank you, Jason, for your time. Thank you, Dr. Bravo.
Well, thank you so much. This conversation is very interesting, and I see a lot in George, but in you too, Jason, is not only the training that you have, it's not only being a doctor, but you care about your patients and doing a good job for them and building an organization that will provide them a good, good care in a respectful way. And that's what I talk about, leadership. That's leadership.
Yep.
It's very nice conversation. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, guys. Have a great day. I'll speak to you all soon.
All right. Bye-bye.
Cheers.
There we go. It stopped. It didn't stop. Why is it? Are you sure you want to stop recording?